Hello, filter-free America listeners. We did it. Once again, we're back together, and I couldn't be happier about that fact. Welcome back to the really big, fancy Filter-Free America podcast that I literally record in my basement next to a 7-foot snake named Sissy. So, there. That's a good opening, right? You like that? Good. All right. Hey, they got a lot of content to get to in this episode, so let me rush through this intro as fast as possible while still giving you the proper amount of setup. Our guest this episode is a former law enforcement officer, and as you regular listeners know, or anyone who follows me on social media, I spend a lot of time talking about the condition of law enforcement in this country. So anytime I get a chance to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who is either previously a law enforcement officer or a current law enforcement officer, or anybody who has a strong opinion or an educated opinion on law enforcement, it's definitely going to be a good episode. And this is no exception here. The guest is a former police officer. Former, and by former, I mean he was a cop and then he got fired, right? He got fired, okay? The guest's name is Brandon Bergeron. Brandon Bergeron. He was a police officer somewhere close to me in a city that shall remain nameless. Reason that is because the guy doesn't hate cops, right? He's just because he got fired from being a cop does not mean that he hates cops, and he is still friends with cops in the department that he worked for. And also in his business, he's a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu trainer. He owns a school in the St. Paul, Minnesota area. A lot of his customers, a lot of his clientele are police officers, which is great. Which is anytime a cop can learn to, defend themselves without shooting somebody is awesome in my book. So he doesn't want to say anything or anything that's going to draw any undue attention on his friends and his students. So we're not going to talk about the name of where he worked at. So please be understanding of that. But we're going to talk about, why he was fired, right? Why, in the process of becoming and being a cop, and then he did become a cop and did start working as a cop, why he got fired. We're going to go into very great detail about that. We're going to talk about training, the training that he went to. We're going to talk about why he even wanted to be a cop in the very beginning. But it's not just going to be about, cheering for the police. Not at all, because he actually does have issues with, the training in law enforcement and the condition of law enforcement in America. A lot of the same issues that I have with law enforcement, he has issues with, or similar issues, or along the same vein. And again, I know a lot of police are going to listen to this episode. I know they are. A lot of friends of the guests, of Brandon's friends and students will probably listen to this episode. So this is a really good introduction to you guys, right? Or gals, who maybe take somebody like me who constantly complains about law enforcement, and you kind of dismiss that as just being, just another cop hater, just another guy that hates the cop. No, it's not what it is. As I explained in the episode, I actually have a lot of respect for the whole idea of law enforcement, and we'll get into that in the episode. But this will maybe better help you as police officers understand the perspective of somebody like myself and the concerns that we have. And so maybe you just won't poo-poo them as fast and think that we're just a bunch of cop haters out here, because it's not really what it's all about. So yeah, that's basically the whole gist of the podcast. It's a very interesting episode. He shares some first-hand experiences that he had as being a law enforcement officer, as being a cop, and some of the things that he has problems with, he had to deal with. So definitely it's going to be a good listen. But first, before we get going here, let me real fast before I even go any farther than this. I want to promote his, Brandon's our guest. I want to promote his Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy. It's St. Paul Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy, of course, located in St. Paul, Minnesota. If you want to find out more about his school and what he can provide you, just go to bjjacademymn.com. All right, so it's just the letters BJJ Academy mn.com, and that will take you directly to his website. You can see pictures of the school, learn more about what training that he provides, and also there's an opportunity for you to get a 30-day free trial right there on the website. So definitely go check it out, especially if you're interested in doing some Brazilian Jiu Jitsu training. It's a great opportunity to get a little 30-day free trial, see what it's all about. And I'll tell you what, after and you'll learn this in the episode. After sitting across from this guy, talking to him, dude's a legit dude, man. He's a good human being. And if you have to go get some Brazilian Jiu Jitsu training, you might as well go for one get training from somebody who's a good human. That's a good trade-off, right? I don't know. What else? Oh, here's the deal. I'm going to do now this is going to be a promotion. But this is going to be a promotion that you're really going to dig, okay? Friend of the podcast, friend of the Filter Free America podcast, comedian Tom Simmons has just released a brand new stand-up comedy album. Yes, right? If you're a regular listener, you know Tom has been, from way back when Filter Free America was the podcast the first time, he might have been the most frequent guest, and I'm pretty sure he is. I think it's probably in total, if you count since we re-released Filter Free America, and then you add that with his appearances on the first time we were out, I think he's been on maybe 6 times total. Definitely the most frequent flyer guest that we've had. And me as a stand-up comedian, he's a comedian that I look up to. I think he is, I always keep an ongoing list of the top 10 slept-on comedians on the planet, and he is definitely high in that number. He's a brilliant comedian. He's brilliantly smart, and his material is, I don't know, it's everything that I love about stand-up comedy. You will find in his material. The intelligence, the taking account of the world around him, and finding the humor in that in any situation is really his forte. And it's definitely worth checking out. He is he's with the label. This album's going to be on the label 800 Pound Gorilla Records. It is on this label. It's released right now. You can get it right now. So if you want to check it out, please go everywhere you download or stream music and comedy. Definitely Pandora. Pandora is probably going to be the most helpful for him if you want to support him as a comedian. And you got Pandora, just add his channel. Just add his channel. That's all you got to do. Add his channel, hit play, sit back, and enjoy some really good comedy. But you can download it, of course, for yourself. You can go buy copies of it. It's everywhere that you can get it. And also, I'll put a link in the description of this episode to give you like a direct shot to wherever you can go find kind of his destination point to get all that stuff. But that's not it. I got permission from the record label, 800 Pound Gorilla Records, to play a sample of some of Tom's material right here on the podcast. So that's what we're going to get ready to do right now. Give you a chance to kind of sit back, get a few laughs before we get going here on the episode, and then I'll come back and we'll kick it off just right. So right now here, check out a little bit of stand-up comedy on Filter Free America from good friend and comedian Tom Simmons.
I used to not worry about things like national debt at all. Like, we owe trillions of dollars. Really? To who? Ourselves? Yeah. If I owe myself $100, like, you know what? We good. Like, that's not. But we don't owe that to ourselves. We owe it to the Federal Reserve Bank. And I don't know if you've read about the Fed. It's a weird thing. It's a for-profit private company. Isn't that crazy to think that there's people out there like Oprah and Bill Gates who've earned a lot of money, and then there's these people that own the Federal Reserve Bank. They actually own the money. What a great business model you know. That's your product, you own the money? Yeah, isn't that cool? We just make it up out of nothing, and then we sell it to you at interest. Wow, that sounds profitable. Can I do that? No, you cannot do that. If you do it, it's counterfeiting, and we will throw your ass in jail. It's depressing to me, right? The very name Federal Reserve was a deception to make us think it's part of our government. The people that are on the money were against the Federal Reserve System. Jefferson was against it, Jackson was against it, Lincoln and Franklin were against it, and they're on the damn money. That's an insult to their legacy. That's like putting Mother Teresa's face on condoms. Yes, and then passing them out at Planned Parenthood, you know? Like, get your Mother Teresa condoms. I died a virgin, so you don't have to, you know?
And there you go. There you go. That is Tom Simmons, comedian Tom Simmons. And obviously, I think if anybody who knows me, you know, that's a perfect example of why I love Tom's comedy. Because he talks about things that I desperately want the world to know about, and he does it brilliantly and in the most hilarious ways possible. And yeah, and if you're a fan of me, you already know Tom Simmons. You already do, because he was part of the secret track on my debut album. And again, I just want great things to happen for him. So if you're a fan of me, you're a fan of this podcast, do the right thing. Go add him on Pandora. Go download his album. Go buy his album. Go see him at a show. And help him become a big, huge name in comedy like he absolutely should be. And don't forget, since doing this podcast, he has also been on 2 episodes. He was on an episode about himself. And I think before or maybe just after that, he actually, we did a little role reversal where he interviewed me about the story about me getting shot earlier in life. And it's a fantastic episode. Still one of the, I think it's like the most downloaded episode. Of him interviewing me. So it's just a great way to get to know him. Check out those 2 episodes. Again, add him on Pandora and support Tom Simmons and 800 Pound Gorilla. Support them too. They got a lot of great artists on their label as well. One more promotion here and then we'll get going. Don't forget the sponsor of the podcast, simplewebsite.us, simplewebsite.us, the place you go if you want help building a Squarespace website. And you're thinking, wait a minute, Joey, those Squarespace, you're supposed to be able to do it yourself. Yes, you are. You're supposed to be able to do it yourself. But using myself as an example, not everybody has the patience or the intellectual fortitude to figure it out, right? That was me. That was my problem, right? So if you are like me and you just want to hand it to somebody else, simplewebsite.us, because that's literally what I did. I'm like, look, guys, I don't know shit about shit when it comes to computers. I can barely turn on my PlayStation when I want to play video games. But they did it for me. They just say, well, Joey, just tell us what you want. And I'm like, I want this. And then like magic, right? Some kind of magic spell, computer magic spell. They did it. And they're like, here you go. And just let us know if you need any changes. So that's the deal, right? I just let them do it. And they will fix anything I want fixed or change anything I want fixed or changed. And it's awesome. Okay. But maybe you're not like me. Maybe you've got perfect level of computer related intelligence and you could do it on your own, but you don't have the time. Another reason to call simplewebsite.us because they will just do the job for you and you can have more time to do whatever you do. Maybe you also record a podcast in a basement with a 7-foot snake and you need more time to do that. And they can help you do that. Awesome. What else? Oh yeah. Also, if you don't want them to do it completely, but you just want a little bit of help, right? They can do that too, right? They don't need to do the whole project for you. Maybe you just need 1 or 2 things changed on a website you already have established. You just want some improvement on the website you've got. They will do that as well. Simplewebsite.us. Lastly, even if you don't want their help whatsoever, you don't want to pay anybody to do any part of it, still go to simplewebsite.us. And this is why, because once you go there, you will find a section of free tips and tricks that you can use when you build your Squarespace website all by yourself, right? Free stuff. Go get it. Simplewebsite.us. All right. Boom. All the ads are out of the way. We're ready to kick the episode off. We're doing good. We're doing really good on time here. Got a good pace going. So let's kick it off. We're going to talk to our guest, a cop who got fired. So the title basically writes itself. I was a cop that got fired. Not a lot of thought needed to make that title. Not at all. I was a cop that got fired with Brandon Bergeron right here on the Filter Free America podcast. Let's go. All right. Why don't you start by telling me what you're doing right now in life? What's your job? What's your occupation? What are you doing to bring home the bacon?
Well, to make my money right now, I own the St. Paul Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy over in St. Paul.
Okay.
I've been doing that for about 3.5 years or so.
Nice.
We opened up initially out of a small Taekwondo school. We were doing that for a year, kind of subleasing out of there. About a year into that, then I leased my own warehouse over down by the downtown St. Paul airport. And we've been there for getting close to 2.5 years now, I think.
Warehouse sounds big. What were we talking, like square footage wise for your gym?
Yeah, I think the total academy is about 3,000 square feet.
Nice.
That includes the bathrooms and the change rooms and all that, and it's got about 1,750 square feet of mat space.
Fantastic. What's your client base right now? Are these kids? Are these fighters who are aspiring to be like UFC-esque MMA fighters? Who are you teaching right now?
Yeah, we have a wide mix of students. We do have a kids program, and I'm currently working with my managers to try to get that more off the ground, because that's been always the program that's always been kind of certainly lagging behind the rest of the adult programs. We really specialize in the adults right now, trying to get into the kids even more so. I have such a wide variety of students. I have people in our adult program that are as young as 12, 13 years old, 17 years old, all the way up to, our older students are up to maybe 60, plus years old, or in their 50s at least. You got office workers, you got people who are more, white collar, blue collar, lawyers, movers, delivery drivers, doctors. I mean, it's a financial advisors, wide variety of students.
Let me ask you this. This is something curious to me. What is the predominant mentality of people coming to get martial arts training now? Is it mostly people like, hey, I just want to find an interesting way to to keep the weight off and stay flexible and do that? Or how many people are coming like, yo, bro, I'm going to be the next Conor McGregor. I need to get this down. I'm going to get me 6 or 7 black belts, and I'm going to be fantastic. And I'm just going to
I'm going to be the next Chuck Norris.
Yeah, whichever. Yeah, pick your. How many of those people show up at your door?
I don't get a ton of those. I get some people who come in and they're interested in like, going into MMA or whatever. But I think that because of the way that we've built our website, our culture, and the fact that we are only a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school as opposed to one of the other
Striking
local
school.
gyms that also give boxing or Muay Thai or what have you, a lot of times people are interested in MMA, start to gravitate toward that.
Okay.
But that's fine with me, because typically the MMA student, the kind of person that wants to be an MMA fighter, they usually have a bit of a higher ego. They're usually a little bit more aggressive with their training partners, which, that you're going to hurt your guy who is a 35-year-old office worker who's just looking to stay in shape. And if you match him up with a 22-year-old who has UFC aspirations, those two individuals obviously have very different goals, so they're going to train much differently.
Right.
So we have more of a student base that's interested in, like you said, a fun way to stay in shape, a way to stay in shape that's more than just mindlessly running on a treadmill.
Right.
And we also get a good number of people who are looking to learn self-defense, whether or not they want to use that in competition or whatever, that's neither here nor there, but they at least want the skills to know that if something were to happen to them, that they could defend themselves and make it home safe.
Or at least have a better percentage chance of surviving in an encounter or something like that.
Correctly. Or not sustaining any sort of serious injury even. So I'd say those are the two biggest things: are I'm looking for a fun way to stay in shape, or I'm looking to learn to defend myself, or a combination of the two.
Okay, right. But I know you had to have at least one that came in the door and think they know it all already, right? Isn't that? Because I mean that's a human trait.
It is,
and it's every area. It's comedy. It was me in comedy. I still think I know it all, but we our egos are always seem like they're writing checks that we can't always cash type thing. So have you ever had that? A guy came, look, man, I already, I've been kicking ass for years now. I used to beat up people in school all the time. So I'm just really here to brush up. Have you ever had like an interaction like that?
Stuff like, it's cool that you're doing it that way, but that's not the way I do it on the street. Like stuff like that,
the street. The street. Every good story starts with the street.
The street.
Different. Yeah.
I'm undefeated now. But yeah, we do get some of that, and we laugh it off, because we do understand that that's just a human trait, and some people just are that way. So they'll come in, they'll take an introductory lesson, and usually at that point we get to have a pretty good idea of whether or not they're going to be a good student, like they're open to learning, or whether or not they're going to be someone who just wants a place to come and beat up on other people, and they're not really open to take in new knowledge, or they think they know better. So typically we try to pull in the people that are going to be good students, and we try to kind of vet a little bit to keep some of those maybe more meatheady types or more arrogant types out, and maybe send them to maybe you'd be better off doing this kind of activity or what have you.
Right.
And me and my staff, we just kind of chuckle at when people come in and they're thinking that way.
Do you ever have to like say, nah, when you're not a fit here, just we can't do anything, and just kick them out the door? Is that, I mean, have you had to reject money in that sense?
We've had some conversations where if certain behaviors hadn't changed, that maybe we would need to remove them from the membership. I've never just said, okay, you're done. I'm always willing to work with people and to give people a chance. So it's never really come down to an ultimatum, like an immediate ultimatum, but it does come down to, okay, I need to make sure this behavior gets changed a little bit. I need to have you do this instead of that. And usually people are pretty receptive to that for the most part. And if they're not, then they usually self-opt out.
Okay. Understand. How about the reverse? You ever had somebody come in who had that type of attitude?
Oh, absolutely. That's even
but
more
then they after the fact
change.
they change and they humbled themselves, and then thank you for that.
That is one of the greatest things to see.
I'd imagine.
When you get people coming in who, and it's all sorts of. It's not just ego. You got people who maybe come in and they're out of shape, or you got people who come in and maybe they're young, so they're a little arrogant, or so they're not maybe they have weird social skills, like they don't know how to interact with people. Maybe they've been they spent a lot of time alone in high school, didn't hang out with a lot of friends, and we bring them into this community where they can start to work on their social skills. So that is one of the absolute most rewarding parts of this job and career, is seeing people come in, lose weight, learn to defend themselves, make new friends as an adult, which is hard to do.
It really is.
It's tough to make new friends as an adult.
It is.
So it's really cool to be part of that and watch 200 plus students make that kind of transformation.
Right. How often does this happen? How often are you in class and then somebody's like got their phone out and they're trying to post on Facebook and they're trying to disconnect from the lesson while maintaining their social media? Does that ever happen? I mean, it happens in every other area. You probably have rules set up to prevent that, but
it's never been during class.
Okay.
Usually if people are ever taking social media stuff, it's like after the formal instruction part, during the live training, during the more kind of open rolling, when people, they roll or grapple for a few rounds, and then they decide to take a couple rounds off to rest or whatever. And during that round, maybe they'll take a picture, maybe they'll make a post.
Okay.
And we're absolutely okay with that, because
Okay.
that's advertising for us. If they're
Right.
posting about us on social media, awesome.
all right, there's no way they're posting during the lesson like, this guy does not know what the hell he's talking about. I could kick the shit out of this guy.
No, I've never been teaching a technique and had somebody walk off the mat and grab their phone and just start texting on their phone. I've never had that yet.
That would be crazy.
I've never had a student fall asleep in class either, so I think my teaching job is better than most high school.
But you've had somebody put to sleep in class, haven't you? Isn't that
That's happened once or twice.
How about have you worked with any people who are either low level or bigger name fighters? Have you had anybody training in your gym or had an opportunity to roll with anybody that was
At my academy in St. Paul, I did have a student earlier on. He's moved on to another academy up in Blaine, but he used to fight with me, and we still have a really good relationship. It's not like we left on bad terms, but he came in and he really went from being like one of those, I want to get out there and I just want to bang and punch. And I watched this guy, his name is Patrick, I'll give him a shout out, I guess, Patrick Skildum. I watched him transform from kind of that more, I want to be an MMA fighter mentality to, I'm a martial artist mentality, where now instead of looking to, I just want to be tougher than the guy across the ring from me, it's, I want to be better than I was yesterday, and I want to, get better at my technique. I want to get better at self-control. And it was really cool to watch Patrick make that transformation.
Yeah, it's a big maturity jump. I mean, in any application it is. All right, so let's talk about before then. And the reason I brought you in is you are a former, what city were you working for law enforcement?
I had worked with, can we not, I don't want to drag any certain departments through any sort of mud. So let's just say I worked with a police department.
Okay, let's do that. That's completely fair, and I completely respect that. So you were working as a police officer. Let's start by talking about what age did you make the decision that you wanted to get into law enforcement? What led to that decision? And kind of give me your view before being a police officer. What was your perspective then of what law enforcement was and what it was all about?
Well, how I got into it, was I actually used to watch, it's silly, but I used to watch a lot of Law and Order shows on TV when I was, a teenager. I would watch it with my dad quite a bit. And I remember watching the show thinking, hey, they get to be outside, they get to talk to a lot of different people. every once in a while they get to do something exciting like chase a bad guy, make an arrest, get into a scuffle. And at 16 years old, I'm like an active kid with ADHD who doesn't like to sit still and for too long. That seemed like a really, viable career option for me. So I started thinking about it at that point. At 17 years old, I began to do martial arts, and I made that same transformation. I used to be the student who came in and was like, yeah, I want to be a UFC, fighter. I want to be a world champion. And I was, growing up or younger, 17, 18 years old, I wasn't the greatest training partner because I was that student that I had described earlier. So anyway, I had MMA and UFC aspirations for a few years. But after a few years, I started to peter out on it because I realized that I loved jiu-jitsu, but I didn't love boxing and Muay Thai and all the other elements that went into MMA. So after a few years of being diverted by MMA, then I decided to quit MMA and said, okay, well, I need another career option. Let me go back to this law enforcement thing that I had thought about when I was younger.
Right. What was your view? And I understand your view as far as, the excitement angle of that. Did you have a perception of, and I want to be respectful and tactful of your, because I know you work with law enforcement now as far as training, right?
Yep.
And you still obviously have friends in law enforcement. Did you have a view about how ethical? I don't know, because I don't want to try to broad stroke everything here. Did you of how that worked as far as these are the good guys and all they do is chase bad guys? There's no bad guys in law enforcement. Did you have an opinion on that at that time? Did you consider the idea that not all police officers are good guys all the time?
That's a good question. I was too young to really be thinking about that. I was young, naive. I'm from a small town in Wisconsin where, some of the biggest crimes that happen are, for the most part, drug possession. Every once in a while you might get like this weird outlier kind of crime. But at that age, I was just too naive to be thinking about that. I was just thinking about what would be a cool job, that would let me get out and be free. So yeah, I wasn't really thinking about it that way at that time.
Okay, fair enough. Well, education-wise, what did you have to do to get yourself prepared or I guess meet the standards of whatever they needed for education to join law enforcement?
That depends on the state.
Okay.
Down south, there are states that allow you to become a police officer with a high school diploma or GED.
That's it? Like no...
obviously they send you through some academy
Okay,
as well.
I was like, holy cow.
Yeah, sorry.
I would make a horrible job with my GED education. Holy shit.
No, down south, even when they don't require any sort of college degree, you still have to go through their academy. And typically, their academies are more extensive because of the lack of post-high school training.
That's good to know.
So an academy, for instance, I was looking at maybe becoming a cop in Atlanta, Georgia. And I believe, if I recall correctly, their academy was something like 7, 8, or 9 months in length.
Wow.
So it was pretty extensive training. Up here, it's kind of.
Hold on. Were you born here? Are you from here?
I'm from Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. You said Wisconsin. Okay, that's right. I'm sorry. So, were you doing your martial art training all in Wisconsin at that time? Was that all?
I was kind of back and forth. I started my martial arts training in Wisconsin.
Uh-huh.
When my training in Wisconsin was no longer available, the guy had shut down his gym, I moved over to Minneapolis, St. Paul to continue to train at the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy up in Brooklyn Center, where some high-level fighters had come out of Sean Shirk, Brock Lesnar, Dave Monet, etc. So I trained there. When I decided to stop pursuing MMA and go back to school, I moved back to Wisconsin move in with my grandparents to save money while I went to college.
Smart move.
And then I had met my current wife back when I was fighting. Her name's Sammy.
Okay.
So when I moved back home, we were doing this long distance thing. So after a year of doing long distance, I moved back to the cities to be closer to her.
Okay. So when you started education process for, just to be clear, for law enforcement?
The education started in Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin. Okay. So now take me to that then. What were you doing what did you need to do to get that?
So in Wisconsin, I believe the requirement is to have 60 college credits and then go through some law enforcement training after that. I enrolled to get a 2-year degree in law enforcement, but it could be it was just 60 college credits.
So could have been anything like fine arts?
It could have been. Okay. However, there was a lot of competition for law enforcement, so the odds of somebody who maybe wasn't as prepared for a law enforcement career getting that getting that job was probably pretty slim. Like
Right.
there were,
They're not going to look at the tooth. They're like, okay, this guy's got a degree in paper mache. This guy's got a law enforcement degree. They're
let's
gonna,
give the paper mache guy a
let's
shot.
give him a
No,
chance,
no.
You know? You can make little badges out of paper mache.
So yeah, 60 college credits. So I was going to school in Wisconsin for law enforcement, and I finished my law enforcement training in Minnesota, where I finished up my 2-year degree. And then after as part of your 2-year degree, you go to a location where they have what's called skills, where they teach you through, criminal law, constitutional law, and they do some like community policing stuff. And then like the second half of skills is a lot more hands-on. So like you have a duty belt on, you're in a uniform of sorts, along with all of your other classmates, and they run you through, okay, we're going to set up a scenario. You're going to walk into this gas station here that we have set up, and then this is the scenario that you run into, and then they put whatever, like maybe it's a robbery that's happening or what have you.
Making it as real as possible without taking you out on the streets yet.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Gotcha. Back to the because this is one of the areas that, as a person who questions some of the stuff that police officers do. Tell me a little bit more about the constitutional law education. Like, how thorough is that? And can you, and maybe every experience is different and every school you go to is different, or every training camp you go to is different, but how often, what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is like, what is the attitude about protecting constitutional rights of citizens? How is that presented? What do they tell you specifically? What's your take on that?
In the classroom setting, they put it in high regard. They said, this is the rules that you have to follow as a police officer, and as long as you're paying attention in class and you're putting forth an effort, you're not the guy in the back of the class sleeping, then you can tell that they do hold that in pretty high regard. But I will say, in my experience, some officers actually out on the street, once you get beyond school and you're in the job, that some of the officers maybe play a little more fast and loose with that. Not all officers, but some.
Okay, we'll get deeper into that when we talk about your time.
Yeah.
Working police. What other training? You said you did the physical training where you're basically kind of acting out the role of a police officer in scenarios.
Yep.
And then where does it progress from there?
So then you have to take what's called the post exam. So you do have to become eligible to become a licensed police officer. There's a licensure process.
Okay.
After you're
Is that every state or just the state you were in?
Just the state of Minnesota.
Okay.
I shouldn't say just. The state of Minnesota for sure. There are other states that do this as well, and the laws and requirements to become a police officer vary state by state.
Okay. So in states like this one to have the licensing, is that a lifetime license, or do you have to renew that where you do a fresh skills test or anything like that? Or
you don't have to officially renew it with a test. However, you do need to maintain continued education, so many credits every few years. I forget all the exact numbers because I've been out of it for a few years now.
Right.
But there were requirements that you take certain courses or you go to certain trainings to accrue credits towards your continued education.
Gotcha. Okay. So you took the test, you passed the test,
Yep.
I assume.
Yep.
And now are you trying to be a law enforcement officer in Wisconsin, or are we trying to do Minnesota now?
I was trying to do Minnesota.
Okay. And so I'm trying to avoid asking about the name of the place. So you did you get hired right away? Were you?
There was, like I said, there was a lot of competition. I sent out a ton of applications.
Okay.
Countless, really, because I had started the process before I was able to become a police officer, trying to get in with this position called CSO, Community Service Officer, which is basically just a good way to get your foot in the door, network, and let that lead to an actual licensed police officer position.
Now I've seen those, at least in Minneapolis police. I've seen those before. I think it's something like that on the side of the vehicles they drive.
Yep.
So basically, you're doing what kind of
You're a
tasks
gopher. You're a gopher. You're maybe checking problem areas, just being like an observe and report kind of individual.
Okay.
You're taking the squad cars into the car wash to get washed and maintained when they're getting dirty. You're maybe doing stuff like inventory of things that don't matter. So like, we're not handling evidence,
Right.
but like maybe making sure all the uniforms in the department are where they're supposed to be, things like that.
And that's just kind of more to get you more into the rhythm and the culture of law enforcement and teaching you some skills that you're going to use, but you're just not running around doing a gun, making an arrest.
Correct. It
like
puts
that.
you in a position where you're working closely with law enforcement, and you can ask questions. You can try to learn the job by observing, and you're helping out the department by doing a lot of the other tedious menial tasks.
Gotcha. So did you get that right
Yep.
away? Okay.
Not right away. Again,
Okay.
it was a lot of applications, but I did eventually become a CSO with one of the police departments, and then I was a CSO while I was finishing up school and skills.
Okay.
Once I finished up skills, then they did run me through their academy, and they brought me on as a full licensed police officer in their FTO program.
Oh, so you had an academy on top of the
Yes.
law enforcement licensing.
Yes,
deal.
it's much smaller though, because the departments in Minnesota know that we go through, skills and education. So some departments will have you go through an academy, not all. There are some like smaller towns in Minnesota where you just come on and you'd start being a cop. Some of the larger departments or departments that are more in the metro area, they might have their own small academy. The one I went through was an extra 6 weeks.
Okay. Now, is that more kind of fine point education relative to the area that you're going to be working in?
Relative to the specific department, quite a bit, yeah.
Okay. What again, without having to
Yep.
allude to the department, can you tell me some of the skills that you had to learn as it applied to where you're working with being?
Some are specific to the department, but there was also a lot of just like general. Make sure you're cultural awareness. We live in the metro,
Okay.
so we're going to be dealing with different ethnicities far more than if you were working up in I don't know, some small town in northern Minnesota. So there's a lot of cultural competency. They ran you through like things with the department, like how does this particular department process evidence?
Okay.
How do you bag this? What do you do with it? How do you fill out the forms? How do you fill out our administrative paperwork? Things like that was in there quite a bit. And they would do more skills. They would do some self-defense training, which is laughable, but we can get into that too.
So let's talk about that now. What do
Okay.
you, if you as a professional trainer, a professional mixed martial artist, what do you see as a weakness there? Because you're not the first person that told me that, and again, as a person who questions law enforcement, I also want law enforcement officers to be safe.
Yeah.
I want them to be properly trained to defend themselves in every kind of way, including firearms. But
Absolutely.
I want them to have other options too. So what's the weakness? What can be improved from your point of view?
Better methods to control perpetrators or suspects. Like some of the escort hold positions, which again, the amount of force you're going to use is dependent upon the seriousness of the situation. So, for instance, you can't treat every situation the same. It's got to vary based on how escalated it is. But like little pressure points, for instance, like you're on top of somebody and they're trying to get compliance through applying pressure points. For instance, there's one up right behind the ear where the jaw meets the skull called the mandibular angle, and they'll grind a thumb into there. The hypoglossal, which is underneath the jawbone, the infraorbital, which is like basically the septum of the nose. But all these things that are relying on pain compliance during a fight, adrenaline is skyrocketed. They're thrashing around, getting these small minute targets such as the mandibular angle or the hypoglossal or the infraorbital. They're small targets. So while you got somebody who's resisting and thrashing around, trying to pinpoint that exact spot and control their motion, which they don't really teach you how to do very well. They don't teach you as well how to stop them from thrashing around as much as they should. And you're trying to apply these pressure points, which aren't working very well because adrenaline's high, so people don't feel pain as much. That's how adrenaline works. Adrenaline's a painkiller. While you also don't have a great deal of control over this person, it's not a good thing.
Right. And on top of that, then you have to worry about, you're not in a classroom setting, you're in the environment, and you have to worry about threats or possible threats surrounding you. So it just makes everything doubly hard. And these are all points that I totally get, when looking at law enforcement, like I get it, I don't want you to get your ass kicked, and I don't want you to turn your back to somebody and get fucked up. I don't want any of that stuff to happen to a cop.
I remember, if I can in skills training, I remember this was in not with the department, but with the education. One of the things I remember them having us do was basically curl up in a fetal position and kick at your attacker's legs, which is, I mean, I can't believe that that's what they were teaching the law enforcement students to do. And, you know, I'm even though I was a purple belt at the time, I know I'm looking at this with an incredibly critical eye, like, this doesn't seem like the best way to do it. But as the recruit, to the new person, the student, you just got to keep your head down and do what they tell you to do to jump through the hoops that they need you to jump through.
Did they acknowledge the instructors? Who's teaching these instructors? Are they belted martial arts people, or are they just?
They're usually former police officers.
Okay. Did they acknowledge any time that this was maybe not always the best kind of thing? Did they
Some
give you?
did.
Okay.
One of the guys who was doing the defensive tactics for the department was at least a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu at the time as well. So he was showing stuff that was, you know, much better than what I got in skills, because he was a Jiu Jitsu guy. He was showing like what we call in Jiu Jitsu the rear naked choke. Law enforcement calls the lateral vascular neck restraint, because
that sounds fancier.
And the term choke, you know, the public doesn't like that term.
Right.
But you know, if it's a restraint, well, then it's just a restraint. You're just holding the guy there, but you're effectively doing the same thing.
Gotcha.
Some departments allow it, some don't. I am all for the use of the lateral vascular neck restraint, because it is a pretty safe way, if you use it properly, to put somebody to sleep, and then you can cuff them up while they're unconscious, and they come to a lot quicker than people think.
Right.
You know, you put a rear naked choke on somebody and put them to sleep. A lot of times people think that, you know, you're out for a minute or 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's usually, it's pretty quick. It's like 10, 15
I've been
seconds.
Choked, not by a cop. That's one of the few things that a cop hasn't done to me. I've been maced by a cop. Never been.
Mace sucks. I had to get that through training.
Yeah, the Minneapolis cop. I don't remember
burns.
who it was. That was good. Yeah, the choke thing. That's an interesting topic, and or restrained, or however you want to do it. Because that's one that you really got to know what you're doing, right, to do that properly and safely. You know,
it's actually pretty simple to learn. It's as long as you're getting proper instruction on it, and you train it enough, which is one of the big things. Is law enforcement are not forced to train their defensive tactics as much as maybe they should be. And I understand why. You know, they have a lot of tasks to do, and you can't commit, 3 hours every single week to training. So I understand that.
Or afford it. That'd be expensive pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's another kind of pitfall. So they give you like, a few hours of this defensive tactic stuff, and then they send you out on the streets where you're hardly trained at that point. You can't even really say you're trained, because it's not going to be hardwired enough into your body to effectively use it in a high stress situation.
Right. This is going to be maybe a silly question to some, especially some law enforcement officers, me, and to listen to this. Is I don't really understand why there's not more push towards less than lethal tools, right? Like we've got mace is a regular thing, tasers are a regular thing, but as we've had so many technological advancements in so many other areas, and not just, I'm talking outside of law enforcement. I don't ever hear about pushing towards less than lethal technology, things to safely immobilize where you're not running risk of creating a heart attack with electric shock or whatever the negative effects are to some people that like tasers are. It's one of the things when I talk about things I wish I would hear police officers talking about is like, and maybe they do, and maybe I'm just not hearing them, so I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. But I just wish law enforcement would be more actively championing the idea of like, give us more options, give us more less than lethal, give me something that's as dependable as a firearm, that's going to, if somebody sometimes it's used for excuse, but it's also a very valid thing too. Somebody who's ingested some kind of drug that makes them feel little to no pain and fight through pain and can still cause damage and hurt, because I know that's a realistic thing. Maybe that's kind of a culture question for police, but do you understand?
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Or
I do. That's going to be more obviously the higher ups and decisions that the administrative would have to make. But I actually think, the taser's a fantastic tool. I've never used it personally, but I have seen it used to great effect.
Right.
And you talked about the danger of of it causing cardiac arrest. And while that is a potential danger, as long as you use it in the manner that you're trained to use it, which you're not supposed to tase in the chest.
Okay, I didn't know that was a specific part. Okay.
The heart is not supposed to be between the two probes when they strike you. So the electrical current, if you're trained properly, should not pass through the heart. You're supposed to use it more from the belly down, or anywhere on the back is okay. But you have to stay away from the head. The groin is a good thing to stay away from as well, and the heart.
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was. I thought when you get tased, it goes everywhere type thing, but it's kind of centralized between the prongs.
Yeah, you can aim the prongs as well. There is a little aiming device where it'll show where the first prong is going to hit, and then based on how far away you are from the person, if you're closer, the prongs will be closer together. If you're further away, they'll be further. But you know that there's going to be some drop with the second prong, so the second prong is going to be below wherever the first prong is, or diagonally if you hold the taser at a cant. For instance, if you're holding the taser at a 45-degree angle rather than vertically upright, then the second prong would be at a 45-degree angle from the first prong.
Okay, that's good to know. I wasn't aware of any of that. The reason that I even started to think about that, there was I don't know, it was a History Channel, Discovery Channel, one of those shows where they would review technology from different areas and things like that and advancements. And this was 10, 12 years ago, maybe at the most, that I was watching this. And it was all about law enforcement technology, new things that were on the horizon. And like they had one thing that I actually have seen, I think it was Florida, I think that they've actually deployed something along that lines where it was like in high-speed pursuits, police will either shoot a projectile at the rear of a vehicle that does something electronically to immobilize it and bring it to a safe stop or something like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it's Florida that I saw that in, that they're doing that. So it, takes down the risk of accidents and things involved with it.
Yep.
They shoot some kind of deal. Like I think the one I saw on the show, like it was actually like a thing that shot under the vehicle, like a small little car that the police cruiser would have equipped. It would shoot underneath there and create some kind of electromagnetic interference with the electrical system of the car. I thought that was cool. But the one that was like hand-to-hand type thing, and granted, when it was being displayed and everything, it was totally impractical as far as carrying and deploying, in a time-sensitive moment. But it was like spraying like this, like a sticky foam, almost like when you see like insulation foam being sprayed.
Yeah.
And it would spray like a large amount of it. I always compare it to like Ghostbusters 2, when they sprayed the purple shit on the bad guy to get the ghost out of them. But it would immobilize them physically.
Just muck them up.
Yes, muck them up. And how their hands and everything were just kind of where they couldn't really move or be, at least to a point of being a threat.
So they're basically like in a foam net?
More like a coating.
Yeah.
That was kind of sealing.
But it binds them up.
Binding them up and removing their ability to move and strike or go for weapons or use weapon if they had one or something like that.
That's a cool idea.
Again, didn't appear practical because of the amount of equipment and storage.
Preparation it would take to
deploy this thing. But I don't know. I don't have the idea for it. I don't have a design for it. I wish I would. But I wish they would just be more vocal about, hey, give us more of this. Give us more options that we can depend, we can trust our lives on, because I want them to be safe, but that are not going to have to, kill at the worst case
or severely injure
injure somebody. I don't know. It's just one on my wish list of things for law enforcement.
I mean, it would be great if we came up with that kind of solution. Yeah.
Right. So we're going through training. We're still talking about your training. We talked about kind of the areas of physical training you thought were a little deficient. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
What else in that finishing section of that personal or that specific to the city training did you have to do? Anything else that we didn't cover?
No, that was pretty much it. It was a lot of classroom stuff, and then they would have us go out and do some scenarios where we'd do simulations. So I don't know if you know about this, but do you know what sim rounds are?
I think I know what it is.
It's basically like paintball. Like little paintball that goes into like a realistic looking like a service weapon. Okay. Where they would have us wear face masks so we don't, obviously hit the face. But, we come into a scenario and maybe I remember this specifically, they had us do like a a blind scenario. So we're just standing there. Like, they bring us in, they don't have us look at what's going on. They just bring us into this other room or this garage, and they're like, okay, turn around, and you turn around, and then you're just immediately presented with a guy who's sitting in a car and he's pointing one of these sim guns at you. So you need to, quickly disengage or get out of the way, get out of the path that he would fire at, take out your weapon, and then start firing off some rounds. And it was set up so that your gun was supposed to jam. So like after 2 rounds, they set it up so that like you only had 2 rounds in your current magazine, so you needed to have the forethought to eject your magazine and reload and then continue to engage.
Wow. Speaking on that, tell me or explain to me, at least as it was presented to you and taught to you, what are the parameters of use of force as far as deadly force, shooting and things like that, as you were taught a few years ago, whenever it was?
The general rule, if you want to call it that, is that you can go 1 step above whatever they are using against you.
Okay.
So let's say if I am trying to escort a suspect and they begin to pull away, we call that like soft resistance or soft empty hand resistance. So we can go into like hard empty hand resistance. Okay. If they begin to use hard empty hand resistance, they're striking us, they're kneeing us, they're being actively aggressive toward us, then we can move up 1 step on the use of force continuum to our soft tools, like say a mace or taser or something like that. Then if they were to bring about anything that was higher than striking, let's say they're coming at us with weapons that we feel might, that they could use to either permanently disfigure or permanently hurt us or kill us, then obviously we can be justified to use deadly force. Right.
And this is one of those areas where, I offer a lot of, what I feel is understanding on my part to, the dilemma of being a police officer, because, of course I have friends who also have questions about use of force and things that we've seen in law enforcement. And I'll say it. I mean, a lot of their perspectives at times can be unrealistic. Well, he just had a knife. Why did you have to shoot him? Why couldn't you, wrestle the knife away or shoot him in the leg and things like that?
Shoot him in the hand.
And people don't understand the ability to close distance and the damage that a knife can do. And it's a very real thing, and I totally get that, And there are situations where, if depending on lighting and things like that, if somebody has an object in their hand, and it could be it looked like a firearm, and I get that, It's when they cross over to things where, I'm trying to think of an example. The Castile shooting was a big one for me, because yes, he had a firearm on him, right, but it was.
Can you remind me of the details of that case again?
Yeah, he was pulled. Okay, the shortened version of it. He was passenger or driver. I can't remember if he was a passenger or driver.
I believe he was the driver.
He was a driver, because he was the one the cop talked to. And the cop, I guess they say they were on the lookout for a specific subject, but the description was black male, wide nose, which I automatically, that makes me like, okay, how many
Thanks for the description, Chief.
Yeah, no shit. And I think they pulled him over. The justification for the pullover was a taillight was out. And they
heinous crime.
Right, real heinous crime. And as I'm remembering it, that he's like pulling him over, talking to him, starting it out very polite, the officer and everything. And Castile was like, I need to let you know, I have a firearm on me. And he was, making it aware. And immediately you could sense, because you could, there's video evidence of it, and then there's also the audio of the officer and everything. So you can hear the pacing of his speech, the cop. You could tell that he was getting anxious, and it was a build up.
He was stressed. Okay.
Right. He had already asked him for his ID, and then he's like, hey, I've got this gun. Well, don't touch the gun. Fine. And as I'm understanding it, the evidence and everything that was presented to me and everything that I've looked at, maybe Castile was nervous and was getting kind of a mixed message as far as, well, he asked for my ID but not touch the gun, so I'm going to go for my wallet and get the gun. But then the officer freaks out, and he's like, no, I'm not getting the gun. And then he's reaching, presumably for his ID, and then he shot him, I think it was 7 times, maybe, something like that. Oof. But killed him right there, sitting next to his girlfriend with a small child in the back seat. Now, these are the areas where yes, he had a gun. He acknowledged that he had a gun. It wasn't a gun seen. It wasn't a gun pulled. And you pulled him over literally for a tail light. So to me, the psychology is like, okay, if you're scared, let's not just fucking murder him. And the thing, why can't we give up ground? Why can't you just give up ground, fall back, give some commands from a distance, and give it just a minute to play out a little bit? You know, and I'm sure and these excuses have probably been used. I was like, well, we don't want it to turn into a hostage situation. Maybe he pulls the gun on his girlfriend or daughter, use them as a, you know, all these different scenarios that I understand and appreciate. But what's that line? You know, what's that dividing point? When do you? Is it okay? Are we not being taught to give up ground? When I'm saying we, I'm talking about the police officers, I guess. But can you speak on that at all? As far as what are we as people who draw into question law enforcement issues of law enforcement, or what are we getting wrong, or are we wrong there?
In that particular instance, as you explained it to me, now I didn't take.
Yeah, I'll take for granted that I got this right. You know, it's
right. Yeah, if those are the circumstances, that's obviously that murder should not have happened. He should not have been killed. I mean, he was honest with the law enforcement officer. Said, "I have a firearm." That's big bonus points. That the fact that he's honest, and told him about it rather than. Because if he wanted to shoot him, then why would he give away his element of surprise?
Exactly. That was one of my big points.
So I understand that. I'm sorry. What was your question again? What can
just your take on training in that scenario? I'm sure similar scenarios were involved, but just like, is there any instruction about giving up ground, allowing a moment or two before going to what is the fatal final decision that you should make, the least desirable outcome in any situation, even if it's a 20 body count murder or something like that? We still want to get this gal to court in due process. What is there any instruction in that, like, as far as clarity and knowing the situation?
They do have instruction on that. For instance, one thing that we went through when I was training, they had this really cool kind of feature where it was basically a laser tag thing. They had a great big screen in front of us that played out a scenario, and we had a firearm that would, I guess, respond to this screen, to this video play out, and that we were supposed to watch and determine whether or not that there was a threat or not. And if you haven't gone through one of those, it can happen incredibly fast, like, you know, the blink of an eye.
Right. And to be in full disclosure, I've seen videos.
Yeah.
Like, I would have shot him too. It makes sense in that situation.
So they do give us training to go through that. But the fact that a gun was never pulled, right?
Right. And the fact between that and the fact that it was a motor vehicle maintenance stop and maybe potentially a suspect with a fucking most vague description you can have, you did not determine that this was the person you're looking for.
No, that was if you ask me if those are the facts of the case and you have all that correct, I would say that was more than a big error. That was obviously a life-changing, a life-ending mistake on the police officer's part.
Right. Like, oh man, and that's kind of similar. We just had with the Minneapolis police officer Moore, who just got found guilty of second-degree murder.
What happened?
The officer Moore, M-O-O-R Moore, the Somalian police officer from Minneapolis Police Department that was just found guilty. I'm gapping her name right now, but she was the actual caller who called 911 to report a crime, a possible sexual assault. Police officers came, drove down the alley behind her house. She approached the vehicle and basically Officer Moore shot her.
There's got to be more to that. She didn't just approach the vehicle, did she?
That's what determination in the story was. She,
wow.
There was initial report that she tapped on the vehicle as it was driving down the hall or driving down the alley, but there was no fingerprint evidence off the vehicle or anything like that to corroborate that. And essentially, he was riding passenger. She approached the vehicle to talk to them and with the intent of letting them know, hey, I'm the caller, and then she was in her night clothes or whatever, and he pulled the gun, shooting across the chest of his partner, who was the driver, and basically just killing her there in the alley. So
Oh
that
my
was,
gosh.
yeah, that was the most recent one, and literally the decision for that was just yesterday or the day before. Yeah, the day before yesterday, he was
And
found
what was
guilty.
it? Found guilty.
He was found guilty on, I want to say, yeah, I think second degree, third degree murder. There's 2 charges he was found guilty of. Sentencing is in June or July or August or something like that.
So do you think that we're turning or getting to a point now where the courts are more likely than to convict police officers? Because obviously, historically, I think quite a bit of times they've gotten acquitted from things like this. Do you think that maybe
He's the first one in the state of Minnesota to be found guilty of murder.
Okay, so maybe we're getting to this point where there's like a reformation kind of happening.
I think so. I think it's begrudgingly happening from law enforcement. I'm not a big fan of like the Minneapolis Police Department union rep. What's his first name? Noel, or what's his name? Yapping his name. But he's constantly on the defensive for the officers about use of force issues and things like that, which is kind of another part of the conversation I want to have with you about the warrior cop training. He was the one after the mayor came out and said, no, Minneapolis police are going to be doing this anymore. We're going to put an end to this. And he was like, no, we're going to keep doing this, and the company is going to provide free training up until whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a more aggressive kind of secondary third-party training that, as I understand it, and feel free to clarify or give me your point of view on it, it sets the police officer's mind state to be constantly in the defensive, and to everybody as a threat.
Yep.
And then I'm broad stroking it. There's finer points, but there's plenty of YouTube videos online that you can see the actual courses and conversations and some of the trainers giving their philosophy on it. And to me, in my point of view, as never being a police officer, a former criminal, to me it seems just egregiously excessive.
Excessive.
And
that was the word that came to mind.
And it changes the psychology where, and then this might be hard, especially as a former police officer and friends with police officers.
Mm-hmm.
In my point of view, yes, I want police officers to go home safely, but I think you accept a degree of risk by taking the job in the first place.
Of course.
And if you wait a beat or two before making a fatal life-ending decision of a citizen, and it results in you getting hurt in that time, that beat or two, that second step that you took, I kind of feel like you need to do that needs to be understood, and that should be accepted as being a police officer. That's part of the risk, is like, we want to at least give a count or two before you make a fatal decision to kill someone. And yes, that may lead to you getting injured, but that's part of the job. Now that may seem, from your position or for a police officer that's listening to this, well, fuck you, you're not doing the job. I got a family and everything like that. But some of it's give and take, it's like, if I don't want to get wet, I don't go work on a fishing boat. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That kind of thing. And I'm oversimplifying it. Yeah, granted, I get that. But does that?
I absolutely get where you're coming from. And the opposite side of the argument is your decision to take a beat or two might not lead to you getting injured. It might lead to you getting killed. You could very well be shot in the line of duty. It happens all the time. I believe multiple hundreds of officers every year are killed in the line of duty. Now, not all of those are necessarily someone shot them. I think some of them are motor vehicle accidents as well.
Considerable amount of motor vehicle accidents,
yeah.
actually. It's a large percentage.
Is it?
So the numbers
Okay.
I've looked at, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you have to weigh that against the option of, I might not go home to my family tonight. And now I'm not saying that we should, obviously we could preemptively do this by just shooting every single person that we come into contact with, right? That'd be the obviously negative, bad extreme.
The worst possible solution.
Yes. But no cops would ever die.
5 miles over the hour, bam. All right. He'll never speed again.
But obviously there's a slippery slope there where we can do that, and the opposite end of the spectrum is we could not shoot anybody, and then we could even, I've heard arguments go so far as to say we should disarm police officers. Then obviously we're at the other end of the spectrum where now if somebody wants to fire upon the police officer, they're completely defenseless. Obviously the right answer is between those two extremes somewhere, but where is that right answer? Nobody really knows. We're trying to find it.
Right. Do you think that training, at least as I'm presenting it, because like I said, have you gone through anything similar? Is it the warrior cop training? And I'm sure there's multiple people providing that, vendors who do a variant of that, because it does appear to be very popular, just based on the amount of coverage it gets.
This is a very interesting issue to me because this kind of hits close to home. There were a few reasons I didn't make it as a police officer, and one of them came from me not having good what they call officer safety. But to me, I feel that I had that because I was more confident in my physical abilities. I didn't feel like I was always in danger. On the flip side, you could say that maybe I'm not paranoid enough. Like, I'll walk the streets of St. Paul at night and hardly look over my shoulder. I'm from small town Wisconsin. I'm just not a very paranoid guy, and I'm confident in my physical abilities because I've been training jiu-jitsu for the last 12 years. So that was one of the reasons I didn't make it with the department. As one of the few reasons was poor officer safety. To me, in training, they did run us through quite a bit of, okay, this could be a threat. You got to make sure you're scanning and always evaluating and making assessments as to whether or not, there should be concern for your safety here or not. But I think you can go personally, anyway. Obviously, this is my own personal opinion. I'm not an expert on this subject. I'm not an authority on the subject by any means. I was a cop for 5 minutes, basically. But I think that is a little extreme because you find what you're looking for. You're going to see what you're looking for. That's just human psychology. Right. If if you're watching, I don't know, a television show and you are looking for as many scenes as you can that have a specific item in them, let's say, I don't know, it could be a soda can, right. whatever. You're going to see the soda can because you're looking for the soda can. Right.
That's how brains work. You're tricking your own mind and things of that
So
nature.
when you're looking for threats, you're going to see threats.
Right.
Yeah, which is good because seeing threats lets you stay safe. I mean, that's what we...
Yeah, and I totally appreciate the hypervigilance is important, especially in that job. I mean, it is a dangerous job. It may not be the most dangerous job over per capita or what have you, but it's a very dangerous job. And I absolutely, and I want to reiterate this because I'm assuming that more law enforcement officers will listen to this episode versus past ones. I don't want to see any of you guys get killed. I don't want to see you guys, any of them, get hurt. It's just, to me, in my point of view, and it's completely my point of view here, is there's got to be a degree of sacrifice for the citizen.
Yeah.
To me, it's just, you took this job, you wanted to do this job, and you have to acknowledge the risk going into it. And if you don't go home versus a innocent citizen going home, unarmed citizen going home, especially over something ridiculous like a tail light or whatever, something like that, I'd much rather see the citizen go home. And I don't think that's too selfish to think that. I mean, because they didn't take the job.
I can understand that. I can understand that line of thought. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it.
To add to that, and I think that's what makes, and whenever I'll tell people my true feeling of law enforcement, the idea of law enforcement is a very honorable job to me. And in that honor, I see a need for the willingness or being prepared for sacrifice, and that's and part of what makes it honorable. It would be to me, it's unhonorable to shoot first,
absolutely,
without clarity,
absolutely,
right? But if
we're in agreement there.
If you safely or respectfully and within reason, I mean, I don't want you out there like, are you sure you're going to shoot me? Are you sure? Okay, now I'm going to shoot you. Is it okay? Stand right there while I shoot you, because that's not realistic.
You sign this consent form,
right? We need this release here for 2 bullets. 2 bullets in the head. Right? But in the Castile one, that one hurt, man. It did, because that dude was the poster child for bad shoots, in my view. A good human being by all accounts. Worked with children, highly respected, a legal firearm carrier, something I also respect. I hated the fact that, because I'm a very pro marijuana person, surprise, that was used as a way to kind of disparage his character.
Oh, yeah.
Because there was that component.
I didn't know. I didn't really know that. So they, after the fact of the shooting, you're saying that they
used that as
painted him in this light to make him look like this, maybe big pot dealer or something.
And that was the worst thing they could find on him, man. He was a good dude.
Wasn't he like worked at the school, like serving
He was a
lunch or something?
cafeteria worker, yeah.
Yeah.
So now part of the family, I think, settled the lawsuit or however it worded, but they started a foundation in his name. And just recently I read where they used money from that foundation to pay off the debts of people or kids who couldn't afford lunch. They'd accumulate all this debt. So they used some of that money to wipe the debt of these kids who are eating in his name. And I thought
that's a fantastic foundation. Obviously, it sucks what had to happen to get that foundation.
Right.
But I mean, get silver lining, I guess.
Yeah. It's good to see that positive and that the family is carrying on the name and doing it in that capacity because of his work doing that. That's fantastic to me. I think that's awesome.
I'd like to circle back to this point
Sure, please.
that I had disagreed with, and I just wanted to kind of state my view. You had mentioned that, if it's between an officer dying or an innocent citizen, to my mind, they're both innocent lives, and obviously, it's not even to my mind, assuming the cop is, doing his job right and living by the law. They're both innocent, and they're both people. It's not like officers are robots or are subhuman or superior to human. These are human people who have emotions, who respond to danger the same way that you or I would respond to danger, but they have a little bit of training, obviously, to help mitigate that. We've already talked about the deficiency in the training. Right. So yes, they get some training, but they're not a lot different than any other human. Right. If anything, I'd say the biggest difference is that they're constantly on the lookout for threats, and they're constantly in these work environments where they see nothing but the worst in people, and they see nothing but the dredge of society. They don't get a whole lot of,
in a lot of ways they may have a more realistic view of humanity, at least it's the lowest common denominator, and it's and what it can do. So I appreciate that too.
I hate to call that more realistic, because they're dealing with a very small subset of society. They go to all these calls, but most of these calls, they're dealing with the same maybe 1 or 2% of the population. Most people don't have a ton of interaction with law enforcement through their life. So they're in the darkest part of society. Right. They have more of a tainted view of society.
They have a more realistic view of the potential.
Of the potential negative. Yeah, for sure. But I like to view the world as a little bit of a lighter place, maybe even just for my own mental health and sanity. Right. I wouldn't call it realistic. I would say they see the darkest of society much more than we do.
They understand the capacity that it's there, and I totally get that too. So let's go. We're about an hour in now. So let's talk now again about. Was it a termination between you and the police department that you were working for, or what's the?
Yeah, it was a compromise kind of. So I was an FTO, meaning field training officer. So at that point, you are under the observation of other more experienced police officers, and they're evaluating you on a daily basis to determine whether or not you're ready to move on and become like a police officer working on your own, or whether or not you're not a good fit for the department. And they felt that I was not a good fit to be a police officer, but they didn't have any real grounds to. Well, I mean, they don't need grounds to terminate. They can terminate for whatever reason. They can terminate because you looked at them in a goofy way. Like they can let you go for no reason in your first year.
Can you tell me at what point of your employment there did they make that you felt you weren't a fit? Is this something that
after
held
about 5 months?
5 months. Okay,
it was about 5 months in.
Okay.
Yep. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought now.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was let go. So it wasn't necessarily that I was fired, because they weren't like, oh, you're doing something egregious. It wasn't that I'd done anything bad. They didn't think I was going to be a great cop at the time. Okay. So they said, we don't want to have to fire you. You can resign, and that way you don't need to have a termination on your record. So there might be hope to get another law enforcement job in the future, as opposed to if you don't resign, then we're going to fire you, but then you're going to have this termination on your record, and it's going to be harder to get a future police officer position. Okay. So at the time, my life plan was still to become a police officer. Like that was the plan, right? So I wanted to keep that door open. So I took the resignation offer.
Was there any counseling along the way before that 5-month point that they said, hey, this is yep. A, B, and C is what you need to work on here?
Yeah, they did. I guess I wasn't great at correcting my behavior.
Okay. What were can you get into specifics, or are you uncomfortable getting into specifics of the complaints?
So there are some instances like I have ADHD, and I have the kind where I tend to hyper focus on something. That's why I can get very good at something like jiu-jitsu, because if I like something, I can let it consume me. So let's say maybe I'm typing up a report back at the police station. I'm working on a report for an assault that happened earlier or whatever, and while you're focusing on these other tasks, you have to always keep your ear open. You have to always hear the radio, just in case they call you to go to a call, or in case they air out another call that maybe it's getting a little bit more serious, or it's escalating, and an officer needs backup. You need to be able to drop whatever it is that you're doing, mid-report, mid-thought. I could be in the middle of a sentence, and I have to immediately stop my train of thought and listen to what's going on, and I struggled with that. That was one thing that was tough for me to do. I took things to try to mitigate it. So I'd gotten an earpiece, so it was more in my ear, but every once in a while it would still get me. So that was one of the things.
That's great. And we talked pre-interview, and it's like I've taken free rides in the back of police officers' cars a few times. It's part of the deal. Get arrested. It's like, yeah, come on in.
Yeah, got a chauffeur.
Right. And you hear the radio chatter, and I was like, God, how the hell do you guys, figure that? To me, and
It's a skill.
It is. It's definitely a skill. Especially when you're dealing with something that could potentially be a life or death thing for you or a partner, and you want to be able to respond as quick as possible to save the life of a citizen or a fellow officer. Man, that's the hard part. It seems like, where's the technology advancement there too? It's like, God, it sounds like a fucking 1950s old crackly radio at times. It seems like we would have advanced past that part of it too, or something.
It's worse when you got like maybe a dispatcher who mumbles or
Dick
doesn't
Tracy
speak
wristwatch or something that prints out, hey, you got a call over on Fifth Street. Hurry up, get over there. Quick.
Some bat signal shines in the sky.
Yeah,
that'd be more efficient.
Right. That I would understand too. So what were some of the other deficiencies that they felt that you had?
Another one was let's see, which one do I want to talk? What do I want to talk about first? Let's talk about officer safety, since we've already touched on some of the training and this warrior training and always seeing threats everywhere.
Right.
Again, small town Wisconsin guy with a high confidence in my physical abilities. Whether or not I should have had that high of confidence or not is whatever, but I had it, so I wasn't very paranoid. There would be instances where like I just went through my old daily observation reports the other day because we're moving, so I was digging around and I throwing stuff out, so I was able to actually refresh on some of this because I saw it recently. Apparently there was a time when I was issuing a ticket to a guy, and it doesn't stick out in my mind because it's not like it wasn't an event to me. I was just writing a guy a ticket for fare evasion or maybe whatever.
Okay.
So I'm sitting on the bench, I'm writing this ticket, and I'm sitting next to the guy. I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna write out your ticket, sorry about this. And my FTO at the time said that he docked me for that, saying, okay, you should be standing, you should be facing the attacker, just because what if this guy, what if he has a warrant or something and he needs to go into prison? What if there's a warrant out for his arrest for a robbery or something serious, and he's planning in his mind to, kill you or to shoot you and get away? It's not the ticket, but it could be something else. And I was just kind of, pretty naive, and I was confident enough to sit there and write the ticket and not be too worried. I guess maybe I'm pretty trusting and naive, being from a smaller town in Wisconsin as well.
Right. That's one I get, and I get that. I think you'd want to be strategically placed for anything like that. So that one definitely makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Was it something you were corrected after the fact? Was that seems like an easy one? It's like, oh yeah, just don't sit there and.
Yeah, that one I was able to correct pretty well. That one wasn't. I don't think that was any of the reason I was let go.
Right. And you had some more that were.
Yeah. Another was decision making, and I also kind of tie this into my martial arts. So they thought that I was not able to make decisions on my own, which isn't the case. However, it is part of my personality that I do like to, if I have the option to have a soundboard and to have like a discussion to kind of work my way to decisions, I do enjoy that. But if I'm alone and I have to make a decision, I can. But since I'm always working with an FTO, right, there's a more experienced officer just to the right of me, not 3 feet from me, who's been on the job maybe 5-10 years. So basically anything that came up, I'd be like, I'd like to handle it this way. What do you think? And the fact that I kept asking, what do you think, made it seem like I wasn't confident in my decisions. Whereas really I was just turning to make this a parallel to martial arts, I was turning to my instructor or my coach, saying, well, this is the way that I think I'd like to do it, but there might be a better way to do it. What's your thought?
Right.
And because I just wanted to be as well informed and do the job as best I could. I was just constantly seeking out the advice of how can I do this better, while abiding by the law, and we can get into search and seizure stuff later.
Yeah.
But they didn't like that. Another thing, so here's an anecdote, right? I'm driving, doing a routine thing when a call comes out about something that's happening, I don't know, maybe a couple miles away. And it had to do with an assault. So it's a time sensitive thing. Like, we should get there.
Right.
And I'm pulling out, and it's not just a couple miles away. So I'm like, hey, I'd like to go to that. Can I go to that? Like, I'm almost asking permission. If he wasn't there, I would have gone.
Right.
But the fact that I turned and asked him, he made it seem like, oh, he doesn't know what he's supposed to do, or he's hesitating before he makes decisions.
So far of what you told me, this number one seems like the most egregious on their part to me, because and maybe I sometimes I feel like I have some ADHD myself, so maybe we have similar deficiencies, if we want to call them that.
Sure.
But I'm like you. It's like you understand you're in a training capacity still, or at least
I'm new.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I would want any officer working under me or with me to have to exploit any resource that they have for as long as they can, so they can add more tools in their toolbox.
Yep, exactly.
And get that.
That's the way I saw it.
Right. Did they ever give you any explanation as to why that wasn't approved?
Yeah. So their side of the story, and it's also valid. If they don't see me making decisions without the input of somebody else, they might think that when I'm on my own, I might not be able to make the decision to go and give them backup when they need backup, when their lives could be riding on the line, and if they're not confident that I can make the decisions and know what I'm doing, when I might be tasked with protecting their life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see the gray area of that one then too, because it's like before they cut you loose, they want to know that you're already doing that. I guess. Yeah. I think we live in a society where people don't ask enough questions, and some people don't.
I'm humble enough to admit that I don't know a whole lot, and I'm also humble enough to admit that if I need to learn more about something, I want to learn as much as I can. Like I've been training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for 12 years, and I'm still learning new things about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. You can always learn. So I'm always looking for opportunities if I can. If I'm interested in the subject that I'd like to learn about, and asking getting feedback from my FTO is one way that I was continuing to try to learn before they had cut me loose. But I guess they had wanted to see me, not do that at some point. They wanted to see me get to a point where I was no longer trying to use my FTO as a soundboard and just working completely 100% isolated.
Right. And just jumping in with a different idea, are you any plans of maybe going back to any kind of law enforcement at all? Is there...
If my academy fails, like if, for some reason, with the life of an entrepreneur, you got good years, you got bad years. If it came down to where my academy, tanked and I had to go back into the 9 to 5 or back into working for somebody else, law enforcement is something that I would still explore, but I think I would be much better at it now after, maturing a little bit and understanding what they want from me a little bit better. I think I could probably pass through now.
Right. Also, did they not, or maybe they wasn't available? Was there no other capacity for you to work with this police department, as to keep you on board? Because everything you're telling me, and it seems like, God, this is the kind of guy who I would want to be in law enforcement. I want somebody who's cerebral enough to put thought into their actions, and responsible, and you carry yourself and seem like a good person I would want to trust with that kind of position. Seems like they would have had some kind of opportunity for you within, maybe you weren't working with the public yet or something like that. They didn't have like I'm saying from the point of view, somebody who used to be in trouble, like a diversion program.
Sure.
You're like, go on this, do this for a while and we'll wipe this off your record. It'd be great. Oh, thanks guys. Anything like that for law officers? Like, hey, this guy's got potential. Let's have him work in the office or do this.
Not really. I mean, cops are cops.
Okay.
There are, if you get to a big enough department, let's say Minneapolis, St. Paul, there are like some desk duties that you could do, but they also want you to be able to go on the street if they need you there. They want you to, because that's what most of the cops are doing. They're in the squad car, they're driving around, they're answering calls. That's what 90+% of the law enforcement officers out there are doing. And if you got somebody who you've hired who at least you feel that they're not capable of doing that, why would you keep them on?
Okay.
I guess.
That's fair enough. Right. They got to have everybody to be able to be all hands on deck if should the need arise. Any other specific elements?
Let's see. I think there was. So we covered decision making. Overthinking was another big one. We covered officer safety, right? We covered decision making
and radio response.
Radio response. Yeah. And the last one, and this is to me, this is the most interesting one too.
Okay.
They dubbed or labeled me as an overthinker, which admittedly I am. I do, when I make decisions, I weigh the ins and outs of everything, and I'm pretty thoughtful. I'm pretty, use your words, cerebral with how I go about it.
Right.
And I was also a very good student in school, like sitting behind a desk, taking notes, taking tests. I had graduated with a 4.0 in my degree. I got all A's in every single class for all 2.5 or 3 years that I'd gone through school. So like I knew my book stuff. And one of the biggest points of contention between this, what you learn in school, the by the book, the black and white, versus what actually happens out on the street, in my opinion, is the search and seizure law, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution.
This is a big one for me too. So
so this will be a fun discussion then.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like. There were also, if you remember to circle back to this, there were some, there's always some good and some bad police officers. Like they're just like any other job in the world. There's going to be good employees or good people, even if you want to go that far.
Yeah,
and there's going to be bad employees or bad people in any given position. And so I got some instances there. I got a couple of good anecdotes about
Officer
safety. We can circle back to that.
Sure.
But back to search and seizure. For instance, here's a good anecdote. I come I approach this lady who's sleeping, right? She appears to be maybe homeless or whatever, I don't know, but she's sleeping in like a public area, like a bus stop.
Okay.
And we call, hey, let's check the welfare. They call them check the welfare, make sure this person's not dead, make sure that they're not having some sort of bad medical reaction. So I go up,
especially here in Minnesota where sub-zero temperatures and things. That was really. I lived in Alaska for 3 years. They had Citizen something patrol, which was not any kind of law enforcement. It was set up to just because they had a horrible in Anchorage was that alcohol-based homeless problem there.
Okay.
So they had a full time, because if not, the cops would be doing this all the time. So they had a van that would drive around looking for homeless people, and especially in the wintertime to kind of protect them and stuff. So that's awesome that the cops are doing that here, because you could freeze to death, and it's especially mix alcohol, if there's any alcohol or drugs, and you pass out in the cold. Oof.
And the flip side of that though is that a lot of times they'll take these check the welfare kind of calls and turn them into a hunt where they're going to try to dig up something more.
Okay.
So anyway, I go and I check the welfare of this person who's sleeping. I wake her up. Hey, excuse me, ma'am, are you all right? She comes to. She wakes. She's fine.
Okay.
She might have been a little drunk maybe, but she was functional. Like she wasn't like falling over. Obviously she got to a point where she had passed out on a bench. So maybe there is something to that.
Yeah. Maybe before she passed out, she was a little more tipsy than
maybe.
she was. She slept it off a little bit.
But I wake her up and I'm like, hey, you all right? You all right? Yeah. Okay. Well, can I get your name? Because just standard procedure. We get names on everybody and we run them, like for warrants or whatever.
Right.
So, hey, can I get your name? And she didn't want to give me her name.
Okay.
And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, fourth law, search and seizure. I'm only allowed to detain people if I have reasonable suspicion to feel that crime is afoot, or that this person is tied into a crime, or they might have information.
Now you're walking into the area there of the videos. Some of the videos that I love, admittedly, I love them, is when the guy goes, when they get pulled over and they didn't do anything wrong. I was like, am I being detained, or you're gonna let me go?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't ask for ID like that. Now, granted, some of these cop blocking guys can be overzealous with it to a degree and doing their little
a shtick, if you will.
A shtick, but also what do they call them? Constitutional audits.
Yeah.
I think that's a term that they use.
I've never heard that term, but I understand.
They do the same thing with Second Amendment audits, where the guy will walk around with a fucking
An
AR strapped to his back,
yeah.
and things like that. I was like, come on, buddy, I'm a pro gun guy, but slow your roll a little bit. Cops got other things to do too. But yeah, you're hitting on some good shit, so keep going. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. So anyway, I wake her up and I'm like, okay, what's your name? Just because it's standard procedures, what we do, I need name and date of birth, and we can run you. And she didn't want to give me her name. And again, I can only like physically detain somebody if I have at least reasonable suspicion, which is very low. It's a very low threshold to meet.
Right.
But you have to have something articulable to be able to say that I think that this person may be committing a crime or maybe engaged in a crime or something. She was sleeping on a bench, right? She fell asleep at a bus stop. I had, to my mind, I had no reason to detain this person or believe that she was involved in any sort of criminal activity. She was drunk.
Right.
Okay. But she didn't seem like she couldn't take care of herself. Anyway, so I'm like, okay. She refused to give me her name. So I said, okay. And I remember I had this, as I was working through this in my mind, I said out loud, well, since, you fell asleep, you didn't do anything wrong, so I can't make you give me your name. And I was going to be done with it, because that's the way that I thought the search and seizure law was.
Right.
My FTO, the more experienced officers, were pissed that I had told her that. Were not happy with that. The fact that I had told her that I'm not allowed to detain her. And
Now, was it the act of letting it go, or was it the act of educating the citizen?
I think it was probably a mix of the two. It's probably the letting it go. It's probably more letting it go. But
this is heartbreaking to me so
but
far.
they didn't let it go. They took over for me. They were like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to work. They got her name. They ran her. I think she was fine. I don't think there was anything wrong, but
did it end with her staying there on the bus bench and you guys leaving?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay.
I should remember that, but that's the result is not what stuck out in my mind. The thing that's burned into my mind is the fact that I thought that I didn't have the right to detain this person, but maybe I did. Maybe I'm wrong. I could have been wrong there.
Okay.
But
I'm kind of going to use the same thing as you. If everything you said as you're explaining, what the fuck? Why would you?
But the cops came in and they made her identify herself to them, and they continued to detain her until she came back clean. You could maybe make the argument that, like, okay, this person was sleeping on a bench. We need to take this person to detox, or we need to take this person to anywhere. And if we are going to if we are going to do that, then we do need the name. But I don't think we did that. I think we just cut her loose, if I remember right.
Which makes it even more frustrating to me. How about this? Was there do you remember any coaching or chastising after you guys were away from the situation? Like, hey, asshole, you got to do it this way, and this is why. Is there any of that going on?
That particular, not that particular instance, but there was another instance where, a guy was drinking from a can, and I don't remember all the specifics. I really wish I had remembered. But it was another point of contention where I wasn't sure if I could search or see something. And if I'm not sure, I like to err on the side of caution because I don't want to violate anybody's constitutional rights. And I was leaving the situation, and, my FTO was advising me about the situation and why. And I'm still like, I don't know, I passed constitutional law with straight A's. Like, I passed all my tests. I'm pretty sure I know it well. And I had said out loud, like, maybe I should I know a couple lawyers. Maybe I could reach out to a lawyer and get some advice on this. And the cop said,
cops love lawyers, boy. I tell you what.
And the cop, and my FTO was like, why the fuck do you need to talk to a lawyer? You're not a lawyer. You're a cop. Do the cop job. You don't do the lawyer's job for them. It's not your job to worry about the lawyer's job. It's your job to worry about the cop job. And I remember that didn't sit very well with me. It made it sound, and it makes it sound worse than it is probably. But the way that sounds, like we're just going to trample all over people's rights and the lawyers can hash things out later.
Right. As a citizen, but also speaking as a person who considers themselves an activist as far as police reform and things like that, that right there sends chills down my spine. It's like, I don't want to fund that. I don't want, as a taxpayer, I don't want to fund that kind of attitude and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That bothers the shit out of me, man. Because if that's the case, if that's the mentality, then what's the use of having laws or having constitutions at all if the police officers the ones charged with enforcing it, and the oath that they took? Let's remind everybody that you took an oath, right, to protect the Constitution, uphold the laws of the Constitution. It's gross to me. Sorry, officers who are listening that are mad right now.
Well, and again,
it's gross.
Let's not get it twisted. That's not all cops.
Right.
That's a few cops. Right. There's good and bad in every profession.
Right. But here's the point to me that makes it a little bit more egregious is he's a
trainer.
FTO,
Yeah.
and he's training the next generation of law enforcement that comes out, and any culture spreads. That's how cultures work. And so you plant the seed during training, and then they're taking that on a 20 to 30 year career.
And if I had changed my behavior, then I would have just become another cop who maybe I would be doing that right now. And it'd just be like, oh, whatever, I'm going to grab whatever I want to grab. And if I'm not supposed to grab it, well, then the lawyers will just throw it out in court.
Right. And if we want to play the gray area game, this is one of those ones. It's like, why would you even do it for this particular case? I get it. You see some guy downtown and he's shady. Maybe he's got a drop of blood on his pants. Maybe he's, there's all kinds of things that could maybe make them more of a, let's feel him out more.
Getting more to that reasonable suspicion threshold.
Yeah. That's what I'm describing. Then maybe that's what it is. Can you clarify that? What, if I'm walking down the street and you guys feel the need to talk to me or something, what is the fine line as you know it? Again,
reasonable suspicion is, you have to forgive me, it's been a few years since I've gone through law enforcement school, but it's a very, very low threshold. Like anything that you can point to, any fact, I should say, it can't be a gut feeling, it can't be like a feeling, it can't be an intuition, it has to be a fact that you can point to and say, because of that, I think that there is at least a very, very small chance that, I don't know, 10% chance or whatever, that they may have been involved in some sort of criminal behavior, so I need to follow through with this.
Okay. I'm going to give you an example. You tell me if this is legitimate or not. I think this is legitimate, what I'm about to tell you. Guy walking down the street, you guys are patrolling, you see a screwdriver sticking out of his back pocket as he's walking down the street. You pull over to have a conversation with him, ask him to ID himself because he may be breaking into homes using that, because technically that could be used for a breaking and entering tool. Does that constitute, in your view? Am I right on that? Am I pushing the line too thin?
No,
am I a bad cop now?
No, that's pretty close. It's also going to depend on some other things. They use this term a lot, the totality of the circumstances, meaning you have to factor in absolutely everything about the area and everything you know. So what area is he in? Is it daytime or is it nighttime? Okay. Is he in an area that where maybe there have been a lot of break-ins lately, or is he a block away from a mechanic shop? Right. where it would make sense to maybe have a tool.
Where are you on your way to? I'm going back to work. I work over here at Phil's Auto.
But even if we do know that there's a mechanic shop and he's like maybe 10 yards away from it, maybe not. But if it's nighttime and it's a residential neighborhood and he's just walking around, doesn't seem to have a purpose, then certainly you'd probably stop and at least question him.
Right. Okay. Anything else on that, on the search and seizure?
There's another one that sticks out in my mind as well, where we go into the situation and somebody who's coming out complains to us saying, hey, there's this guy drinking in here, can you do something about it? So we go in, I identify, hey, how you guys all doing? We're doing good. They present their qualifications, that they're legally allowed to be where they are. I'm like, okay, so they're fine there. And I was like, oh, there's a bag next to them. I say, oh, okay, what's in the bag? And they think they said it's close to them, but they said it's not mine, or it's not my bag. And again, it's a very gray line, and I might have maybe played too much on the side of caution, where I'm like, well, he said it's not his bag, and it's in a very public area. Like a lot of people use this, are in and out all the time. So I can't actually tie the bag to them. And I'm like, okay, well, and they seemed like they were functional. Maybe they were drunk, but they're functional and they're not being mean to anybody. So I'm like, oh, whatever. I was just gonna let it go. But again, my FTO stepped in and he asked, oh, you gonna grab the bag? And I'm like, oh, he said it's not his. And he's like, well, we're gonna grab the bag and search it. Or was it that he said, maybe no, did he say it was his? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the details.
No, take your time.
I think he said it was his, but it was like a plastic shopping bag. It was like something, innocent. It wasn't anything evidence of criminal other than the person saying the guys were drunk. And of course, there's probably alcohol in there potentially, but again, I don't know if I have the probable cause to search it. In order to search something, you need probable cause, which means that you need to believe that there's a more than 50% chance that there's contraband in there or what have you. There are exceptions to that, and even if you do get probable cause, even if you do have probable cause, you need a search warrant to do it. But there are exceptions, such as if you're in, if somebody's in danger, like if there's somebody's going to be hurt or something, if you feel that evidence is going to be immediately destroyed, if it's an immovable vehicle and you feel that by
Now,
walking away,
can we stop on that one for a
yes,
second?
please.
I think evidence is going to be immediately destroyed. That could be
Flushing drugs down a toilet.
Yeah, but that's a pretty big window or loophole
That's
right
true.
there. It's like we knocked on the door, no one answered the door. We think they're in there, and we think there are drugs in there. Can you kick in the door? And
If you're
we're pretty sure they're in there. We're pretty sure there's
you
drugs.
knock and announce. You're supposed to knock and announce, hey, this is the police department. If shortly after that, like you hear toilet flushing or something, then yeah, you can boot in the door
Right.
because you'd have reason to believe that they may be flushing evidence.
Well, I poop a lot, so I'm destroying some evidence, all right. But it's usually my lunch. But no, I get what you're saying. About the bag thing, though, isn't that if nobody claimed it, then you're recovering?
Then it could be because it was. That's why I'm thinking that it must not have been that because I knew that.
Right.
If they said it wasn't there, then it's just, open. It's discarded. I can
Right.
grab it. So I think they must have said it was theirs. It was like a plastic shopping bag, and so I wasn't like, and he wasn't under arrest. If I were to arrest him, then I could search everything within his possession.
Right.
But he wasn't under arrest, so I'm like, okay, I guess I can't search it. But again, my FTO stepped in, grabbed the bag, opened it up. Sure enough, alcohol. And I don't remember if we tagged him or not. And if that happened, I would have not tagged because I'm like, oh, this is an evidence that could have very easily been thrown out of court if he wanted to make us think about why would I try to charge out a case that I think would very well be dismissed.
Right.
So yeah, just search and seizure stuff like that. I'm not detaining people when I feel that I don't have the right to detain them. Not searching things unless I truly know that I have the right to search it, and they wanted me to work a little bit more in the gray area. Yeah,
that's one, and then also the attitude that you get, because I've done it before, and I'm a large white guy with my record doesn't show up anymore, but neck tattoo. And I've had officers ask to search my vehicle when being pulled over for a drug. Do you mind if we look in around it? I was like, no, you can't look inside my vehicle. And then get indignant and upset with me about it and threaten. The time that it happened, I'm thinking of they threatened to bring a drug dog, and I literally didn't have anything. Like, look, guys, I am a weed smoker, but at that time I had nothing illegal to worry about. I just didn't want, like, no, I don't want you to search my car.
Right.
Full
And
stop.
you have the right. You have the right to refuse. To
Right.
give
And
consent.
then he threatened to bring. Well, we're going to bring a drug dog around. I was like, well, go get the dog. I love dogs. It's great. And he got really fucking. And I was curt and firm, but not disrespectful. Not like "fuck you, pig" or none of that stuff. No, I was just no.
I'm exercising my right.
I didn't even say like that. No, I just don't want you to search my car.
Sure.
And I was just kind of being because I always try to say as little as possible. Because that's just always the best advice. But he was very upset about that. He did not like that. What do you got? Something to hide? In a classic line. You think it's hack, but
Yeah.
cops do say that. Well, if you got nothing to hide, no.
Oh yeah, that gets said.
Yeah. I hate that attitude of it. I do. It's like, allow that. If you
You-
got something, fucking do your job. Do whatever you got to do within the means and scope of your job. Fucking knock yourself out. Do it
Right.
perfect. But
Yeah.
don't fuck with me because I don't want you to fucking messing around my car, I don't know.
And I mean, it's never a bad thing to ask. Like asking to search your car is absolutely okay. There's nothing wrong with asking for consent. But if you
Well, I'm going to argue that because
okay,
especially as a young person who maybe is not aware of their constitutional rights and things like that, it's and quite honestly, cops are allowed to trick you and lie to you. I mean, that's part of the deal.
Sure.
But I hate that they take advantage of some younger people, and even if it's to know they don't recover anything or they don't find anything bad, and they just search the car and let them go.
that happened to me
It
once.
still sucks to me that you're like, well, it's how you word the question. Like, and you see this badge of authority, a literal badge of authority, uniform of authority, and like you get nervous, like, well, I guess I got to let him. He asked me to do it. I don't like it that they don't make it clear. Like, look, you're not required to let. I think that they should reinforce the constitutional laws that they're enforcing. Like, when you're not required to let me search your vehicle, but I would like to search your vehicle just to, whatever.
Okay.
And I get it. More people would say no, but
Of course.
I don't know. I just hate that idea of the tricking mentality or the how you ask something or then the intimidation. even if it's sometimes they intend to be intimidating, or sometimes it's just, the person perceives it as intimidation, or they become intimidated just because not everybody is used to talking to cops,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Especially if you're 16, you got a new driver's license, you've never been, like, this is the first time you've ever been pulled over,
Right.
that kind of thing. Sure.
And I hate 16-year-olds. I hope a cop punches them in the no, I'm just kidding. but you get what I'm saying. I don't know.
I do.
And it's probably an unrealistic look at the world. But God damn it. I mean, fucking, can we have some kind of like baseline of legitimacy here,
I disagree. I think, there, you can't ban, or you can't say cops can't ask.
Right.
I understand where you're saying maybe we should throw in the disclaimer of you're allowed to say no, but I still want to ask this. That is the possible
That to me is
solution.
an acceptable middle ground, just so you do reinforce, just like you got to read their rights when you arrest them.
I remember
Why
one.
can't you present the rights as like, hey, I don't need to pat you down right now. I'm not required to, but it would make me feel better in the conversation here, and this is why.
Mm-hmm.
And just that, I guess it takes me to this, is like there's some cops that have no humility when dealing with a citizen. But I get that you have to also present an image of strength and
Yep.
confidence and things like that too. And it's very hard it's hard for me even to describe what I'm trying to get to, but it's hard to find that area where you're both being respectful to the citizen and you're protecting yourself as a cop, and you're still presenting this era or this aura of authority, which you need to do your job properly.
Yep,
So
they
it's
call that that aura of authority. They call that officer presence.
present. Okay.
Yep,
That's a nice way to put it.
officer presence.
Gotcha. Anything else before we're getting close? I know you got to drive across town. We're at 3:23 right now in the PM.
Say on the search and seizure. I remember, this is just a fun anecdote, I guess, and maybe could be helpful advice for people listening. As a person in general, not even as the way I was as a cop, just as I am as a person,
Right.
I am generally inclined. I have a high respect for honesty and transparency. So I remember one time when I was a police officer, and I'd pulled a guy over. Turned out he had a suspended license or something, so I had to sit there with him until somebody new came out. But he was cool with me. Like, he was cool, he was respectful. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to tag you. I'm just going to have somebody come and get your car for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we're waiting there, we're not doing anything. I said, hey, do you mind if I search your car? Like, what? As long as we're here, beats standing around doing nothing. Might as well do something for my job. And he says, yeah, go ahead. And as I'm searching, I find a little vial of marijuana in I think it was his center console. And I was gonna maybe take it, tag him with, or write him a ticket or whatever. But when I come out, I think my FTO asked if I'd found something, and I said, yeah, I got something. He said, oh well, the guy told me, like, while I was searching, the guy told me that he had a little marijuana in his console, so he had admitted to my FTO that he had weed on him. Right. And it was a small amount, and the fact that he told my FTO, I was like, oh, okay, I let him keep. I let him keep it.
Okay.
I was like, okay, it's. You were cool. Like, you were honest about it. You told me, like, you didn't try to hide it. You didn't try to be evasive. And I have respect for that. So I'm like, okay. And
Is it just weed, or can I have a vial of crack? And you're like, just go ahead.
Severed head,
Look, officer, I want to let you know before I've got a couple dead bodies back there. But I told you so.
Obviously, there's a line there, but yeah.
Not a line of coke, though.
No.
You would go to jail for the Latin line. But God, I appreciate that, because I've consumed a lot of marijuana, like, orally as I got pulled over. Like, holy shit, God, I just got this fucking blunt.
Yeah, it reminds me
again.
of Super Troopers, the opening scene.
Yes, without the meows. Anything else? Any other anecdotes or any other things you got time for that you want to share? Because your time was, what was your total time as an active?
5 months.
5 months. What was was there a big danger situation, or the most dangerous, or hands-on, or any kind of similar story, an action cop story?
There was some. Obviously, it's only been 5 months, so I can't say I chased down a serial killer or anything. But
right.
And this is another really good story that circles back and kind of reinforces the point of maybe officers need better training, or some officers anyway maybe be better if they conduct themselves a little differently. Not all, but again, some. So again, I'm on, I'm training. I pull up to, I'm on a call. I'm assisting another agency. Like, another agency aired out on the radio, hey, we're dealing with this issue, and I'm only a few blocks away. So I pull up and like, hey, can to go help. I pull up, I get out of my car. As soon as I get out of my car, one of the local agency officers points at the guy and says, "Hey, can you grab him?"
Okay.
And I get up, I lock eyes with this guy, this male, and as soon as we lock eyes, he bolts, he runs. So I chase after him, and I end up he ran on one side of the fence, and the direction of the path that I took to chase put a chain link fence between me and him. I hop the fence, I'm chasing him. He runs up to the back door of this house that we're behind, and he sees that he's not getting away. He sees that I'm getting ground on him. I see where he's going, so he stops. He puts his hands up. He's like, "Okay, I'm done." So I get up on the porch with him. I grab his hands. I put him behind his back, and I say, "Okay, get down to your, look away from me. Get down to your knees." So this guy is on his knees, facing away from me. His hands are behind his back, with the backs of his hands together, his palms facing outward. And I believe I have a fistful of 4 fingers, so I'm controlling both of his index fingers and both of his middle fingers. I'm going to get to my handcuffs to cuff him up.
Right.
And by this time, the other cops, the older, more veteran cops, had gotten up to me, or had caught up to me. And as I've got this guy on his knees, hands behind his back, I'm about to cuff him up, they tackle him. And they hog, so like 2 or 3 officers are now hog piled on this guy, wrestling with him,
Right.
when it would have been.
Were they screaming, "Stop resisting"? The classic.
No, they were not. They were not screaming, "Stop resisting," although that'd be hilarious.
Right.
But I just remember, like, at that point, like, I didn't jump in at that point. I'm like, oh, I took a step back because I was
Right.
just kind of shocked at what happened. Like, I had this guy, like, he had submitted to me. I was about to cuff him up. He was in a
Right.
very, very vulnerable, submissive position, and you still tackled him. And
Right.
like are continuing the fight. They made the fight go on longer by tackling him and then making it not even just going on longer, but putting other people at risk, because now people are fighting and wrestling and people can get hurt. And
Right.
now this guy might change his mind and be like, "Oh, you guys are, I got a knife in my pocket. Now you guys piss me off. Maybe I'm going to grab the knife and start stabbing." I don't know.
Right. Well, the thing that bothers me, and I've seen that, but I've literally seen it, like being out on the street and seen that happen to a cop. Like, the guy is submitted, he's done, he's not doing whatever, but then the other cops will, kind of go, and then it gets kind of aggressive, and they're ripping him and pulling him and trying to get him whatever. Well, here's the thing: is like when you tog pile on somebody, and you get hit inadvertently with a knee or a hand or something like that. What's the first thing you're naturally going to do? Put my hand up. You reach up and
Sure.
and block a punch or block a kick. It's a natural reaction.
Very
Or if you
natural.
get hurt, if you get into some kind of hold or something like that, that's going to give a little motivating pain, you're going to react to that. And it's not resisting, it's natural reaction.
Just being a human.
Right. So there's countless videos that you can see of that. I've seen, an eyewitness of where they've created a movement and then called it "stop resisting" or "you were resisting," or and then
Hands
it
up,
gives
don't
them,
shoot.
Yeah, it gives them more excuse to punch or to swing or I've never seen a cop shoot somebody in person, but it's or have I seen that? No, I don't think I've ever seen a cop shoot anybody in person. But it's creating that problem or creating that stress or creating something that could be give a reasonable, well, they were resisting or he put his hand on me. I thought he was going for his gun. You look for the Jamar Clark case, the one that where the officer shot Jamar Clark, Northside police officers, that resulted in that basically protest siege of the 4th Precinct a couple years ago. You remember that?
Oh my God. Yeah. I don't remember what led to that, but I remember all that.
Well, it was all involved in around a protest of Jamar Clark, and apparently involved in some kind of domestic violence thing. It was never really clear of who was it the girl he was fighting, was she at fault or was he at fault or something like that. But it was a questionable shoot to everybody, but of course, but Minneapolis Police Department and what's the investigating body that investigates crimes?
Internal Affairs?
No, the other one, it's the 3 initial thing that here in the area that does that. I don't know, whatever it is.
Okay.
They're ones that kind of in like the initial aftermath of a like a police shooting or something like that. They'll investigate it in most cases. But that was kind of the question, was that they were, did they really need to shoot him? Was he at one point they were saying
It's always
well,
the question.
Yeah, and it's just of course no direct camera footage was available. There was some security footage from a distance and some things like that. I just wish there was some way. Again, if we're circling back to where, the less than
Less than
lethals
lethal
and things
force.
like that. It's like, God, I wish there was just some foolproof way that both protects the citizen and the cop. And, so many problems and so many fears that I think citizens have, or concerns that citizens have in some cases, would be alleviated if we could just kind of figure that out and just, I don't know. And also the cowboy mentality. It's a high, and
Yeah.
I get it because
Yeah.
I get it. As fighting with another person, there's a thrill factor to there.
There is.
And
Driving code 3, lights and sirens.
yeah, and I'm not going to say I wouldn't feel that same exhilaration. I wouldn't still get hyped up. I wouldn't, have interaction like a football team does. Let's go get them. I get that, that's human nature, man. But I don't know, where's that safe spot where the cops are happy, the citizens are happy, and everything's cool, and everybody lets them go home with a little vial of weed, and everybody's happy. That's the.
I honestly don't think that I don't think we're too far away from that sweet spot.
Okay.
I mean, obviously some terrible things happen.
Mm-hmm.
But those, few and far between. I mean, I guess that's a relative term, right? What's few to one person may not be few to another.
Exactly.
But 98, 99% of the police officer interactions with the public out there are fine.
Yeah.
It's the 1 or 2% that makes the news, and then the media, plays that up. We're at this, for some reason right now in our society, everything's dichotomized politically.
Right.
So the media just fuels that by posting a story and posting their political stance on it, and they just divide a line down everybody. So I think we think things are more chaotic than they actually are, but just the stuff that's not chaotic, the 99% of the time doesn't get ratings at the
Right.
news.
I 100% agree, and I've had to, and this, as any human is, I'm constantly evolving, or at least I hope I am, and my position on some of these things has evolved, and I have gotten more understanding. And you're absolutely right. I mean, some things are, and even some of the people who I side with, I side with about 92% of Black Lives Matter in a lot of their positions and things that they say, and they're absolutely right. And the being upset and being concerned about the stuff completely validated in my mind. I totally get it. There's some components of how they do things and things that they say, and some of the things I've seen in person, like at the protests and at the 4th Precinct, I question, but I don't know. Everybody seems like they have a motive. Like you said, there's a political component to everything. Everybody has a motivation.
It's all propaganda now,
right? I mean, the cops are motivated to protect themselves, which makes sense, and I don't know.
Wouldn't you be?
Yeah,
motivated
definitely.
to protect. Everybody is,
Yeah,
right?
everybody should be. I just wish everybody, cops and citizens, I don't know, would carry themselves with just a little bit more honor, a little bit more honesty, a little bit more lack of hypocrisy on all sides. And again,
and that's not just law enforcement, that's just humanity in general.
In general, across the board. Now, last time I had a police officer on, I kind of let them, like, what's a message that you could send out to police officers to, to get things right? Some words to that effect. So I'm going to flip it this time. And if you, speaking on behalf, as much as you're comfortable doing this for police officers, what would you tell citizens who question law enforcement, or, I don't know, have any problem with cops or things like that? What's something, a middle ground or a message that you'd like to give to them?
If you're nice to cops and treat them with respect, they will treat you back with respect typically. So, I mean, if I have an interaction with a cop, it's always, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. I'm completely honest and transparent with them. And as long as you kind of run with that game plan, things tend to work out fine. Now, I'm saying that as from my perspective.
Understood.
My perspective is going to be much different than, say, an African-American female, for instance, as a white male.
Right.
So I guess I don't know how the experience would be like if I was not a 29-year-old white male, but that's what I got from my perspective. Just go along with the program, do what they ask you to do within reason, and typically things turn out fine there.
Right. Fair enough. I agree with that for the most part. Actually, I agree with that completely, because you're right. And from our perspective as white males, and I've had some very positive interactions with law enforcement that I would definitely say that. I think I've had more positive interactions than I've had negative interactions. So for the most part, I get what you're saying.
But you don't
And
see
honesty
that,
does go a long way too.
yeah, but you don't see that in the news.
Yeah. If it bleeds, it leads. If it's polite, they don't give a shit.
Right.
Kind of deal. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
This
This
is
is
a really
fun.
good conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, there we go. Another episode of the Filter Free America podcast has now begun to come to a close. Right? Did you guys enjoy that episode? Did you guys enjoy that conversation I had with Brandon? I enjoyed it. I'll tell you right now. I got to sit next to the adversary, kinda, cop, former cop, whatever, somebody who still has very strong supportive opinions about law enforcement. We got to exchange ideas. And I hope I know I left with, a better feel, a better take about law enforcement. I hope he left with a better feel or take from somebody from my position who questions a lot about law enforcement, and obviously does because, he has some questions himself, and he brought up some really good points, and he has firsthand knowledge. And I again, a message again to any law enforcement officers who maybe listen to this episode. Number one, if you pull me over and I smell like weed, ignore that. Okay. Ignore that. Number two, though, please, take account, of what we're talking about in this episode. Okay. You do have a very important job. You absolutely do. And I'm definitely not one of those people who's like, oh, we don't need no law enforcement. We just Wild West of this shit. Everybody walk around with a gun and we don't need no cops. No, I would like to have an organized entity within society that helps promote safety, protects the citizen base, stuff like that, morally and ethically though, and do away with all the weed tickets. That's none of your business what I smoke. But yeah, again, I hope law enforcement officers took something away from this, and I hope you have a better understanding of people like me who do have actual legitimate questions and gripes about the condition of law enforcement in this country. But a special thank you to Brandon Bergeron for coming in, having that conversation with me, right? Because it's not, it wasn't easy for him to do that, right? I don't think it was easy for him to come in knowing, going into it, who he was going to be talking to and the point of view and perspectives that I have. So I definitely appreciate that. And that was awesome. What else I need to remind you about before we get out of here? Oh, don't forget, please support a good friend and comedian Tom Simmons. Please go download his album. Please add him on Pandora. Subscribe to his channel. Support him. He is a brilliant comedian, and I definitely want to do everything I can do to get his comedy out there into the world. So again, I'll have a link attached to the description of this episode, and all you have to do is click on the link, and it'll take you to everything you need to know about getting his album. Okay, or if you got Pandora, just whip it out right now. Search Tom Simmons. Subscribe to his channel. Boom. There you go. The whole deal. Anything else? Oh yeah. One more thank you to the podcast sponsor, Filter Free America podcast sponsor, simplewebsite.us, simplewebsite.us. Thank you guys for all the work that you do, guys and gals, for all the work that you do, helping maintain the digital footprint of the Filter Free America podcast. And if you guys want to go check that out, go to filterfreeamerica.com, filterfreeamerica.com. America always intentionally misspelled with the letter K.com. And you can see the website that they help me maintain and have built for me. Anything else? I think that's it. All right. Good job, guys. Way to be an excellent audience. You did perfectly. You did exactly what you needed to do. You sat and listened to the episode. Good job. Well done. I appreciate it. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Does that work? Yeah, that works. Do something good today. Go out and I don't know. You got an old neighbor next door who lives next to you, right? And then maybe they need some help. Maybe they need you to mow the lawn or something like that. Go do that, right? Speaking of mowing the lawn, I gotta go mow my lawn today. I want to do that as well too. All right. Make sure you spay and neuter your pets and children. Keep seeking the truth. I love you guys. And I'll talk to you in the next episode right here on Filter Free America. Bye-bye.